Property to an investor typically is just bricks, but you go and put someone in there who's never had security or warmth or comfort and feeling safe and having their own space and, you know, the ability to be creative and, I don't know, just this is the moment I've been waiting for since I started in property. Nobody can tell you whether you're successful or not, which is why I find it weird. Is like, well, you're successful. Well, how do you know? What was my goal?
If money wasn't a thing, would you still be doing what you're doing? Let's say property.
I don't know.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Inkspired Mind podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Jack Wicks, who has been in the property investing game for over 10 years. He has made and lost over 6 figures on one deal. We spoke about how you can get into property as a young person and what is the best strategy to get into property investing in 2022. He is now on a mission to help 1 million vulnerable people find a safe home to live in while providing his investors great returns. We dived into more of this throughout this entire podcast. So without further ado, I'm Jats and this is the Inkspired Mind podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Inkspired Mind podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by a person who has been in the property investing game for over 10 years and now he's on a mission to help 1 million vulnerable people get a home. And he's also doing that while giving his investors a great return. We'll dive more into all of these things throughout this podcast. So Jack, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of podcast. Join me on this podcast.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me.
Firstly, I just want to get started from talking about your journey, because I did say you've been in the property game for over 10 years, but I think it's been 13 years if I remember correctly.
I think I always get confused. I started when I was maybe...
So let's go right at the back of when we first started.
Yeah, so I think I was 21, 22, something like that. That was around the time I bought my first place. So I think... I worked in pubs, basically, pubs and bars. My older brother got me a job in like clubs and stuff when I was 17. It was pretty cool. I loved working in pubs. I actually miss it now. But that was where. But I've always been doing stuff since, you know, the classic entrepreneur stories, all that stuff at school and all that sort of thing. But mostly from my mum, I think, going to car boots and, you know, all the just spotting opportunity. Tried a clothing company with a mate that I met in the pub. Great fun, failed miserably. And eventually, me and my older brother on the train to work, he's opened the Metro, I think it was, and it was a free 3-day property course. And we were like, oh, why don't we go and have a look at that then? And we did, and we bought more courses, and we did the whole classic, like,
going through
journey of it. It seems like that's your rite of passage now. In the 21st century is you have to go and get bullshitted to by people and lied to with fake crying on stage about how it's changed their life and how you can get a credit card limit up to 50k, which just so happens that's how much their course costs. Breaking down all the barriers to entry. Like, you have to go through it to realize that is complete rubbish. And as long as you learn, you know, and it's not going to completely cripple you, then I think it is what it is. I must have spent 50, 60k on property courses.
Oh, wow.
But again, it's always difficult because we are where we are now. So there's no saying without those, I would be here. So, you know, there's never regret in that sense, because I also, at every single one of these things, regardless of what I thought about the mentor or the person that was coaching or the quality of the information, there was always something, some person or something that I took from it. Always something. And you never know the compound of those things, how that will end up in 10 years time. You know, that little seed that you got from that shit course that didn't do anything for you, that might, unbeknown to you, have grown in 10 years, and the compound effect of that little nugget of information kind of gets you where you are. So I find it's always difficult because, again, mentors and trainers, they got a lot of bad rap because people walk away and they don't think it was worth the money, and stuff like that. And it's a difficult industry, which is why I got out of it.
I joined, I'd done a 2-day course as well. It's called the Property Crash Course. I'm not going to say who is by, but
don't mention that.
You probably know by the
that name around me.
So I did go to it, and I think I was one of those people who took one and then decided to take another course. And you go through the rabbit hole of doing so many courses and not taking any action. And I always say I failed in property, But I think the main reason was because I just kept doing courses and not actually doing anything. So you were 17 when you got your first job, but what age were you when you got your first property?
First property, I think, was, again, I'm terrible with dates and times, but I think it was 22.
Oh, so you were really young.
22, 23. So it was somewhere around that, yeah. So we came off the course, did what we were told. So walked around the street. So at that time, my parents were living in Hastings. They just moved from where we are in Surrey. And they were like, there's really cheap houses here. So I did a bit of research while I was at work. I was at the airport at this time. So I'd left to get a proper job at the airport, doing shift work. Spent most of my time just looking at properties and doing research. And it was in a regeneration project. So the area had loads of money put into it. It was a 5-year regeneration. It was 2 or 3 years in. So I was looking at that based on what we'd learned and thought, this is perfect. We can start to get the value uplift here. And we did just that. We walked along, called up the boards outside of houses. And it was so oddly exactly like the course told us it would go. So the woman was like, nah, you don't want this property, but I've got one that's not on the market yet. You should come and have a look. So we went and had a look and met the owner and bought the house. It was 4 flats for 250k. So we borrowed the money from an investor. We got an 80% mortgage on it. So we only needed 20% of that figure to get it bought. Stamp duty was relatively low at the time. And then we also raised the money for the works, refinanced almost all the money back out. And I was like, I'm the bollocks. Look at me. This is so easy. I told everyone. I told you I knew how to do it. That led to the cockiness and the ego side of it. We then moved on and bought a £750,000 block of 10 flats and a shop, town centre, sea views, grade 2 listed building. I just all that was in my head at that time is I'm 23 and I can't wait to show everyone this big building that I'm going to buy. I fell in love with it. That's the problem with property is it's emotions. For some reason it gives you these feelings and these emotions when you go into a place and you're just like, I have to have this. So even my parents, I went in there and they were like, it must be £1 million. And then the woman was like, yeah, it's 750. And we were like, oh my God, it's so cheap. Because there was these winding staircases, there's pictures dating back to Victorian times with horse-drawn cart, and just fell in love with the story of it and the idea of it. And reality was a lot different to that. I literally had to say to my wife, right, I'm going to have to be living in Hastings for a bit, 3-4 days a week, doing manual labour, which, by the way, cannot do anything, nothing. I was pulling down walls, trying to paint stuff and do stuff on the cheap. We lost over 6 figures on that deal.
So how much did you make in your first deal?
The first deal just took every bit of money back out and we held onto the building. So we didn't sell it, but we held that building until about, 4 years ago when we sold it eventually.
Makes sense.
It was a great project.
And you know how you said you raised, let's say, all the money. So in that deal, did you have to put any of yours, the 20% you said, that was the deposit? And so you saved up the deposit by just working? No.
That was investors' finance.
Oh, so technically the whole property you got was through other people's money?
Yeah, exactly that. And people overcomplicate that part of the process.
How does that work? As in, what do you get and how much do the investors get? Is it really worth it?
Yeah, it depends. You can structure it in any which way. Part of the reason why I actually do like property is because of the way in which you can structure it in any way that your mind can drum up. It doesn't matter. Me saying to you, right, I need 30 grand. How would you like me to pay the interest? It could be all at the end. It could be on a monthly basis. It could be that you get a percentage of the actual project and that you'll get part of the uplift and the ongoing profit. So it could be that I'm going to cut you in 25%. You're putting 25% down. So I'm going to give you a quarter of the building. So you're going to get 25% of any uplift. If we sell, you'll get 25% of profits. And in the meantime, you're going to get 25% of the cash flow. There's 1,000,001 ways in which you can do it. Makes sense. Ours was fairly simple. Ours was just done on a yearly interest rate, paid up at the end. Okay. So when the project brings all the money back out, you've got all of that capital paid off, plus you've built equity of 25% normally within the building, and then you've got the monthlies. That's the typical perfect deal.
Makes sense.
The reality is far from that simple and easy, which is, again, course sellers will tell you that's just a cookie cutter approach. You just go get that building and 25%, then you get it all back out and everything's great. And you just do that a million times and you've got all this money and the life you want. It's never that easy. At the moment, with the market and the way that it is, no one knows what's happening, interest rates going up and cost of living and all these different factors. You could be halfway through a project and the deal doesn't work anymore for no fault of your own.
That's true.
that is the reality of property, and you have to be quite you have to understand that you're using other people's money here. That's what I learned more than anything. I was humbled, and looking back now, I'm so glad that it happened when it did.
It was back in when you started as well.
Yeah. Well, that young, you're meant to take risks when you're young. That's the biggest thing I'd say to anyone, is just like, what are you waiting for? So many people in manual jobs or like working at the airport or working in a pub, they're scared of taking a risk. Well, there is no risk to me.
That's true.
It's not like that employer's not going to take you back if you come back with your tail in between your legs 6 months later. The reason people don't take risks, ego.
I think
That's all
ego
it is.
and fear. I think the thing is,
I think people will pretend it's fear. I don't think it's fear. I think it's that they cannot possibly go to their mates and go,
like,
that didn't work out.
Yeah.
I tried and failed because their mates had ribbon, told you shouldn't, get back.
I think that's
to
really
job.
true.
That's all it is. No one feels like they're able to fail because it makes them a failure.
That's really true.
I have failed so many times with so many different business types, so many different, even within property. I knew the minute I went on that course that property was my thing. But I didn't know which bit about it I liked the most. So like the good and bad thing about property, like you said, you end up doing a million courses because there's a million strategies, a million different ways in which you can make money in it. And that causes confusion. It's great for the course sellers because they know that you're going to go, oh, I'm not actually sure. I might do this one, and just to test that one. And let me do this one so I've got a comparable and I can see what I really want to do. And that was, I'm a shiny penny guy, hyperactive, get bored of stuff super quick. And that was the downfall, really, was just constantly going, all right, I've done that now. I want to do the next thing, and then failing in that and failing in that. Which is why we're sort of 10 years in and only just sort of going, this is the thing now. Social housing, what we do now, the purpose. Like, I know you met up with Simon Scribb recently,
yes.
And I spent a lot of time with him when I was going to quit. So I was speaking to Simon about being in like getting involved in the project and doing something completely different to what I've ever done before, because I just got bored of the bullshit in the industry, how boring I found it all of a sudden, but just the lack of promise. Everyone, there's no handshake and people go and do what they say they're going to do. That's the way I live my life, and I just get so bored of people giving you that handshake and just fucking you over every time. And property is one of those industries that's just full of sharks and people just leeching off of everything. But what it did, what I realized was I just wasn't looking deep enough into the business that I actually had right there in property. And that was that we were housing vulnerable people in the properties that we were putting in there. But I was looking at it like, I don't want to speak to another investor about the interest they're going to get. I can't do that same conversation 10 times a day.
It wasn't fulfilling anymore.
Not at all, because I think, and it's not like we're, multi-millionaires, but once you get to a level of money where you're comfortable, it becomes unimportant. And then you need to be fulfilled. Like, yes. you need to have that purpose. And people that haven't got that level can't see that. It's hard to like rationalize that I don't have to worry about money anymore and I'm bored.
It makes sense when you get to that certain amount when you're making enough, but you're like, I just don't find the joy. Like, and people will find this so weird and dumb to listen. Like, you have the money, what else do you need?
Yeah.
But it's what comes after the money, and
that's why all the celebrities kill themselves. It's why rich people coming through rich families. That's why they're always wrong-uns. You see, they're always like on drugs, and because they have no purpose. If they made a success of themselves, people would just go, "Oh yeah, daddy's money though." Yeah. Oh yeah, well look at his family. Of course he's going to be successful. He could have changed the world. He could cure cancer in his business, and he's done that off his own back. But they go, "Yeah, but look at the family he came through."
Yeah,
and he will never have fulfillment. That person who's in a wealthy family, and that's why they're never happy, regardless of the money. And that's what it made me realize is like the human element of what we were doing in our property business was way more important, way more impactful, and made me think we're actually doing something amazing here. And literally, I remember sitting in a cafe before a meeting and typing like a madman about the business change. The next day, we'd change the business name from Property Empire to Social Housing Group. We'd set a goal of helping 1 million vulnerable people, whether that be homeless, risk of homelessness, asylum seekers, like absolute broad range. We don't discriminate in who we help. As long as these people need the help, we will look to try and help them. And And that alone just like sparked a million ideas. And I was like, one strategy isn't boring because there's so many, you know, we could create a crypto coin that helps us fund the deals that help more vulnerable people. We could create a platform in which we connect social housing providers with landlords, and then they can help more people. Like all of a sudden these ideas are just like, and these are all big businesses. These aren't like little, let's just do that for a bit. And it's amazing when you get that clarity and the focus in any business whatsoever, how like saying no becomes so easy. I used to want to say yes to every bit, like this massive building that someone's got. I'd be like, let me spend a week trying to figure that out. Whereas now it's like, does that get me further up towards this 1 million person goal? If it doesn't, it's gone. Can we facilitate that, or is it taking me away from our bread and butter, which means I can house 20 people this week doing what we already do, or potentially housing 40 people? So maybe we'll spend a little bit of time on that, but still continue what we're doing day in, day out. And that was the biggest change for me, was that focus allowed me to just get rid of all the noise. And know what we wanted to achieve at some point in my life, if it's even in my lifetime achievable to get 1 million people housed. Hopefully it is. I'd like to see it with all the hard work, but maybe it's going to be my sons to take over, whether they like it or not.
How I don't know if you have the number, but what's the number reached at the moment?
I think we're around 600.
Wow.
Yes, I mean, 600 sounds a lot, but not when you put it towards 1 million.
Towards 1 million. That's true, but still, if you think about 600 people,
600 human beings are now in long-term accommodation, in a safe, and that's the big thing, safe accommodation. You know, a lot of these people have been on boats and cars and planes and whatever with their families just to try and get to a safe place. Like, it's so hard for us to fathom. I think naturally, you know, I'm in Surrey, you're in London. It's so, like, you can't imagine it sometimes, having to chuck you and your kids on a fucking dinghy across the sea, knowing full well you might not make it because the life there is so bad compared to what you might have here. And look, we're not putting them in perfect, amazing, you know, grass on walls, and you know, this stuff is safe, functional, and it's clean. They are the main things that we make sure, because otherwise the financial model wouldn't work. People are going to bitch about it and go, well, I wouldn't live in it. If I wouldn't live in it, I wouldn't house people in it. But that doesn't make sense.
And I think that what you just said is important as well. So like, as a business, you also have to look at it from the business perspective. So how does it make sense for you at the end of the day? Because yes, it's having a purpose, but at the same time, how can you fund the business so you can keep fulfilling your purpose? So behind the scenes, how does social housing even work? So
the reason we originally fell in love with it, before we even got to the point of that, like I said, it was a fairly new thing. We were like, shit, we're actually helping people.
It's a type of strategy, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. It's basically, social housing is quite broad. It could be that people are just on benefits and you still have to self-manage them, but they get paid by the council.
Okay.
We don't do that. We work with social housing associations and companies, and they will give us a 10-year lease on our property, and they will pay us directly. They will manage the tenants. They will do everything. Because, again, you're dealing with vulnerability here. We are not, like, that's not our job. We wouldn't know what to do to help these people if they needed it. So these companies are. So we then get the building ready, we renovate it to their standard, and then they give us a contract which sets out the exact amount of money each month they will pay us, regardless whether it's full, empty, whether they smash it up, they have to return it in the same condition. It's super secure as an investor, this model. So we're then helping them. So, I mean, to put it into perspective, there's just in the south of England, so draw a line across Milton Keynes and go below, 28,000 asylum seekers. It's just in the asylum seeker thing. 28,000 are in hotels currently, costing the taxpayer £65 a night.
Wow.
And it's the worst bit about that is you're talking, these guys have been through what we've just spoken about, and they get chucked in a hotel room. They're in a Holiday Inn with their family. Like, it's just not like fit for purpose. So what we're really proud of is we've created like a way in which there's no losers in our business model. There's no one that's paying out money and that would be upset. Like, so we've got our partnership program that we created. So anyone that comes into that, if they find us a property deal for our social housing, we give them a third of the profit of that deal for the rest of the life of that deal, however long that may be.
So that could be, if the lease is 10 years, then I'm assuming 10 years.
But then that could become another
Extended
10
as well.
And we fund all the works. So we spend the money on it. All the person does is finds a deal and goes, Jack, we've had this accepted. And we go, sweet, done.
So how does one find a deal though?
Right move. Agents, deal sources.
So one goes and finds a deal, speaks to the landlord that we're going to do this and that. Then you work with social housing association, and then they will give you so the money you spend to renovate. Do you have to spend your own, or
we spend ours? The partners don't.
The partners don't.
So I said to my business partner when we were trying to figure out a way in which we want to make this we want these guys to be self-motivated. I don't want to be spending my time every day going, go on, make a call, change your life. Whereas they know they've got the money there. So typically, it's a 600 quid is a typical profit you'd get on a rent-to-rent deal that we do. So we sublet a lot of the properties because it allows us to house more people quicker with less money. So all of the investment funds that we raise, which the partners can also help us raise and get 6% of any money that they bring into us. So like we've done 25 grand in commissions we paid out this month. One of the guys, 19, brought 150 grand in. We just paid him 9 grand in 1 month. It's nuts. We're like that. Would you accept 6? But it all works. But like the numbers, not me doing the numbers, by the way, business partners like meticulous about the numbers. This is worked out to a fine art. We know how long it's going to take us to renovate, how long it's going to be before the first rent comes in, what that rent's going to be, giving the partners their third, giving the investors up to 20% interest, which is also paid monthly, by the way. So we're bringing in $250,000 a month in loans at the moment to help us fund these deals. We've just started purchasing again now. We just had an offer accepted yesterday for a 3-bed flat, which will turn into 2 3-bed flats, which is going to house 2 families basically. We're looking at hotels, but we're going to change them so that the hotel rooms become self-contained. Because one thing, as much as housing people in HMOs and stuff, is typically student stuff, and we'll get them in. I'd much prefer it if we could house these people in their own space. So what we're looking at doing is, say, a hotel room that has an ensuite in there, is we put a small kitchenette to allow them to prepare and make food, and that becomes a self-contained room. It will be a small one, but it allows them just to have their own space. So we're looking at converting hotel rooms into that type of accommodation.
Don't you think it's a bit more riskier? Because is it for students, I'm assuming, the hotel, when you convert it with a...
No, all social housing.
Oh, all social housing. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And you said it's risk-free in the sense that the landlords also get paid every month, regardless of if there is anything... anyone living in the house or not.
Yeah, correct.
Which makes it a lot riskier as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the hotel we're looking at, I think it's 32 bedrooms.
32 bedrooms. So that's 32 people.
32 people every building. And the deals on that size they make more sense. It sounds mad. It's less risky to do a building of that size because the contracts that we place uplift the value of a building.
Makes sense.
So for anyone that doesn't understand commercial valuations, basically, if you have a contract in like the one we have, 10-year contract, anyone going in to value that building, especially if it's a hotel and it's massive, they know they can't say, let's see what the value of the last 32-bedroom hotel with a 10-year contract on sold to give us an idea on the value of the building. It's just not going to happen. So technically, it's considered a business. In the same way that you would value a business, you value a property like a hotel with a contract in place. So what they'll typically do, depending on the area, they'll give you a multiple of the yearly gross income.
Okay. And how much is the multiple on?
It depends on area. So up north, you're going to be as low as 6 times. Where we're looking at around Portsmouth and the south coast, you're looking at 10.
10
multiple times.
10 gross.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the 32, to give you an idea, the 32 bedroom will give us 600 quid a month. And that's net. All of our numbers are net because the contract takes care of all the maintenance, the management, the voids, all the problems.
And the social housing takes care of all the maintenance and everything.
Yeah, they do all of it. And they have.
So when you said if the tenant breaks something, So
Yeah.
they take care of it.
Yeah, we don't hear about it for 10 years.
So technically, the only thing you're doing is renovating the property, getting the contract in place, and then you're out of that.
Yeah, I love how excited you're getting. This is yeah.
Because I'm really fascinated. I told Sumit before starting this, I'm like, I really want to know, like, how does this thing work? Because it's really interesting how it's risk free. Obviously, there's always some risk. It's not risk free. There's always some risk related to it. But it's minimum risk compared to, let's say, HMOs with students, because students are wild. They could break stuff, and then you have to kind of spend your own money. And that's why I think that's what puts a lot of investors off from property, because that's one thing which put me off when I found that out when I was first learning about property at the age of 19. But yeah, you can carry on about.
Yeah, no, it's the thing we want to try and make it predictable. Property is so unpredictable. So with a commercial valuation, it's predictable. We know what that contract is worth, therefore, and then we'll find out what the multiple is from a lender. So before we even go and offer on a property, we know what we could get a revaluation at. I'm a big fan of community, and especially with what we're doing in the social aspect, I know that investors are bored of just investing their money. And again, it sounds mental, but these guys with tons of cash, it becomes boring.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to get 10 investors with 90k each, all coming in, and we'll have a fucking massive party in the hotel before we convert it, and we'll get everyone involved in the process, and we'll document the process from start to finish, and everyone's included, and they're going to tell their mates about it, and all of a sudden we're going to have unlimited amounts of money, and then it's just going to be how do we house the most people with the least money or in the quickest times. It's not always about the money, as long as it's sustainable. So this is the other thing. A lot of people will be looking at this going, oh yeah, he's all about the people, but he's making money.
But the thing is,
I don't see there being a problem, because the biggest problem I see is charity. Charity is flawed in every way, shape or form. Number one, people going because it's like they make, I don't know, a football game, like soccer charity, whatever, soccer aid. Oh, let's give loads of money. You have no idea where that money goes.
Yeah.
If you invest with us, you see every single penny and where it's spent and what it does to help the people. And you actually get interest on it, by the way. But charity, every time they run out of money, they have to go asking for more.
Yeah.
Whereas our business model is self-sustaining. Every month, our property business is making more profit, and that is then just reinvested. Right now, that first building that we've agreed to buy will be one of, for that month, we will be on a run rate for a building a month, whether that be a big one or a small one. We're buying a house a month from now on. You probably remember I sold everything.
I really want to know more about that as well, because you had a massive house in I think just outside London as well.
Yeah.
And I saw your garden. I'm like, that's like 3 size of my own house.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was just looking at.
Well, that's the rental. So.
Oh, so you rent that?
So we
now?
rented that, yeah. So we sold. So I've owned my own house for 10 years, something like that. We started with a 1-bed flat, sold that, and then slowly moved up in terms of size. And I was sitting there with my first child born in a 3-bed end of terrace, basically on a motorway, and I was like, I've got all this money tied up in my house, and I'm having to pay £1,000 a month, and I'm in a house I'm not happy with that isn't big enough for what we want. And I was like, this just doesn't sit right for me. And that's when the social housing, the predictability of the income from a social housing deal, I was like, that's it, done. I'll sell this. We'll move into a rental, which becomes a monthly amount. And then I'll reinvest the money into social housing deals, which will then just pay my monthly costs.
Makes sense.
So all of a sudden, that same amount of money that is just stuck in that house now pays for everything. Plus, we're helping people and we're building a business that's sustainable. It was a no-brainer to me. Everyone, lucky for me, my wife was on board. I had to show her the big house first. Yeah. She was like, "Yeah, forget about the intricacies. We're moving in there." But people find it mad because the rent is quite high. But equally, the rent isn't high to me
because you just.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see it. It just comes out of a business account. Done.
That's the great part of having a business which provides good cash flow, and then you can fund your life with it as well. And so. That's probably the reason why you sold it. And I think, Simon Squibb, he always talks about why investing in property at a young age or buying a first-time property is a bad idea before 40. Do you think the same?
I'm in two minds on it, because I wouldn't have had the money to invest in the first place if I hadn't bought my flat early on and then gone. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't have had that amount. But then equally, we still had to put a 10 grand deposit down for that flat in the first place, which was just hard-earned money between me and my now wife. So could we have put that 10 grand into a business and had way more money now?
That's
and
true.
actually maybe would have not been so stressed a lot of the time in our life, worrying where the next pound's going to come from. Or I 100% get it. And people are never going to understand it. I think that's the problem that Simon's going to have, is some people just aren't wired that way.
Yeah.
And the world would be a boring place if everyone thought the same, because no one would be as impressive as we are otherwise, would they?
That's really true. I mean, again, I'm gonna keep diving more into the social housing aspect. So let's say someone's complete new, they're 18 years old, and they want to get into property. Now, because you have done other strategies in the past, like rent-to-rent, HMOs, and lease option agreements and everything, this kind of I see there's a combination of rent-to-rent, lease option agreement, and you get a lot more benefits compared to those strategies. So how would one 18-year-old get into property? Let's say he has not £10,000. Realistically, he has £3,000. How would that person get into social housing?
Into social housing, it's hard. So I'm always naturally going to say the partnership program, but that's not going to be for everyone, because ultimately we do show people how to do it, and we fund all the deals. Like I say, we are the ones that put all the money in. All you're going to do is learn from us on what we consider a good deal, and then when you find it, we will take it and you will get your percentage. Okay. So that's a great way, and that's why I did it in the first place. Is like, otherwise people go and spend that £3,000. People always go, invest in yourself, but you'll go spend that £3,000 like we spoke about. Could be shit, and then what? Like, you might look at that and go, I can't do that, and I don't want to do that.
That makes sense.
And then you can't go on another course because you haven't got more than £3,000. So it is really hard.
But do you think with £3,000, not social housing, but something else you could get into property with?
Yes, deal sourcing. Just did a video on my YouTube actually about deal sourcing. It was quite sweary though. I swore quite a lot about the industry that is. Deal sourcing is great, but you have to do it with the right thing in mind, which isn't just money. You have to think about the investor. And there's a lot of moving parts. If you get deal sourcing right,
so what would be the first step for that person?
First step for that is to go on YouTube and just research what deal sourcing is, the processes, the systems, how it works, and then research based on that what you've learned. What do you want to sell? What sort of deals? So I always recommend selling rent-to-rent deals, whether that be HMOs or serviced accommodation units, because they're easy to find. Plus, loads of investors want them because they're a lot less money in. You can still charge £3,000 to £6,000. But the thing I like most about the rent-to-rent is that once they sign it, your fee is locked in. So the problem with, if you go sourcing a purchase, that could fall through after 3 months. And then you've got to give that fee back. So you can never truly say you've earned that money until it's completed. And even then, if you're going to do a refurb for that investor, you've got to wait till the refurb's done and hope that doesn't go over budget. And then you've got to get it tenanted. There's so many processes. With rent-to-rent, it's like, you've signed that off, deal's done, the £3,000's in the business now. So I'd look to do that. But
the only thing with one thing with rent-to-rent, when I was getting started as a newbie, the one thing in my head was like, if I tell the landlord that I'm going to be subletting it, would he be fine with it and stuff like that? Do you think most landlords are fine with it?
Some are, some aren't.
Some are.
Numbers game, like I always say. You literally have to, your rite of passage is that you hit the phones hard every single day, and you're going to get called all sorts of stuff, and you're going to get told all sorts of stuff. But I always say to everyone, like, just make a joke out of it. Just understand that is, you might have to make 100 calls to get one deal, but that one deal could make you £3,000. You could do 100. You could do 100 calls a week.
Yeah,
no problem. You're telling me that's not worth it? £3,000 a week when you're 18 years old, and all you need to get started is YouTube to learn everything, because it is all there. Obviously, you can do courses that structure it in a slightly better way and maybe fast track you somehow, give you a community to ask questions in. But it costs you around £1,000 to be compliant. So there's a level of compliance that you need to be an official deal sourcer. Even if you co-deal source, you should technically be compliant.
What bodies do you need to?
So you've got I can't even remember. There's basically
RLA or
that's a letting agent one. But there's a few complaints ones basically, and then there's insurance policies like data protection and ICO. There's a few others. You'll be, again, information's everywhere, and it costs around £1,000. I think £800 maybe, something like that. Then get a website, really simple website you can do for next to nothing, and then just market, get out there, tell people what you're going to do, what you can do for them, how you're going to take the stress away from them, how you're going to find them better deals than they'd be able to find themselves. It's like any business. Like I said to you before, it's like, I don't really like talking about property because property is just the product that I chose to do as a business. What actually makes a success in property is, mindset, a lot of it, the ability to connect with other people.
People skill.
Yeah, 100%. They always say it's a people business, but every business is a people business.
Yes.
It's that simple. And I think that's probably one of the only attributes I have as a businessman is the ability to connect. And the other thing is that I think the ability to ask. No one wants to ask for favors. No one wants to ask for anything because they think that makes them look stupid or weak or whatever. I ask for everything. I skip steps all day long because I'll just be like, could you just do that thing for me? And look, if I can help you in any way, I'll do the same. And it's the way in which you ask, which is important. I mean, you probably get it as much as I do. Get me into property. It's like one liner. Like, that's not how you ask people. You wouldn't go up to someone in the street and just be like,
for me, it was just like, yo, can you teach me Amazon FBA?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, but it's like,
but what how? Like, what will you do for me? I don't want okay, let's not talk about the money there, but at least give me some value in some form of way, or at least a good text message. I
think that is an art, and that is an art in which can get you a long, long way. You obviously have to understand what value you can give first, but you don't have that experience in property. You could be 18 and you have value somewhere in you.
Your time.
90% of it is that. Let me hold your bags for you. Let me do admin time. Let me do something. I just want to learn. It's like when we first met on TikTok.
Yes.
I messaged you and asked you for a favor. And I said, could you do a post for me? If you want any help in property, if you're ever thinking of getting into it, come to me. I will repay that favor. And that's how we started the conversation. That's why we're here today.
Yeah.
Same with other guys like all over TikTok and Instagram. The reason that I get invited to
it's just basically if you don't ask, you don't get.
Well, that's it. Yeah, and people are so scared to ask the question. But if you ask it in the right way with something in return, most people. The other thing is, I actually think it's selfish not to ask. Because for me, if someone asks me and I can help them, I enjoy that.
Yeah.
I want to give you a hand or, I want to give you a bit of information that's going to make you go, oh my God, that's going to change my life. I want to do that. So you're almost taking away from the person by not asking and trying to do it yourself and messing it up and losing loads of money and getting stressed and upset and maybe quitting and going to get a job that you never wanted.
That's very true.
So yeah, it's a weird one.
One thing you spoke about there was like property is the product, but then other stuff is like the mindset and everything. And going back to your second deal where you lost almost over 6 figures, how did you kind of rebound from that?
It was hard. I felt a lot of guilt more than anything that I was so brazen to go and spend somebody else's hard-earned money, the investor's hard-earned money. I so flippantly went into this building with the cockiness and all the rest of it. I can, in my head, I'm a very visual person, but every time I tell this story, I am on Hastings seafront in the van that we had, listening to music and that horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Yeah.
And I remember just driving on being like, what are we going to do?
And what was the reason behind you losing the money on that?
I did basically, we trusted the agent who'd brought us the previous deal. She gave us all the figures that we needed and all the rest of it. Basically, didn't have enough money for the refurb works to get them to the level that they needed. It was a grade 2 listed building, which means it's protected. So they don't actually allow you to make changes and stuff like that. You have to, even if you want to paint the wall, it has to be done with a specific paint.
Wow.
Door handles internally, like all of it is protected because it's an old building, basically. We knew nothing about that. There was no research done on end values. Basically, dropped the ball on every basic. I knew it, but I just thought, she knows, so I don't need to bother. But just nuts. There was so many rookie mistakes, and I knew better. Even then, I knew better. I got swept up into, let me buy that big building, and then I can show everyone, and I can take my mates around it and show them I own this massive building in town, and that was it. Ego.
It was basically doing it for others and not for yourself.
Yeah, ego disappeared after that.
And I think that's
completely and utterly.
It probably was your worst, but the best lesson you learned from that.
Everyone always says it, don't they? Like at the time, it's the worst thing in the world. Fast forward a year or two later, and and you're actually glad it happened when it did, because the lessons that the losing at that level taught me have changed my life completely.
That's very true. That's very true. And now 10 years ago, the situation wasn't as bad as what we are in the market.
Yeah.
As you already mentioned, the interest rates are going over the sky. Like just in the morning, it said the interest rates are predicted by the start of next year, it's going to be almost 5%. So I'm a person who's looking to get into property, right? Buy a property. What do you think? Is it a right time to buy?
The best time.
The best time.
This is the moment I've been waiting for since I started in property.
Because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Maybe two if you're lucky.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that downturns are where people make the most money, and a lot of people watching this will be like, "Oh, so selfish," and all the rest of it. Because the unfortunate thing is you're going to have families that are going to get a remortgage come up, and they're going to triple in terms of their monthly costs. But at the end of the day, you've got to be doing we are in an age now where you can find out online what you can do in certain situations. And if you actually try, most people just bury their head and hope the government fixes it.
Yeah.
They've never fixed anything. You're bitching about them on one sense, and then you go, I won't do anything like learn about stuff or try and do this myself and figure out how we're going to come through this. Just hopefully they'll fix it. Yeah. And I think ultimately you will pay the price if that's your mindset on this stuff.
Have you seen a fall in the property price already?
Yes. Well, in the south, yes. Apparently not so much in Wales and in the north. So it always does. The north, they're always slower than us. But
there's a saying, they follow the north follows the. I don't know, but when I went to this,
it does. I mean, the other thing is you got to think in the north, the property prices are a lot less. Therefore, an interest rate change on less money is less painful, if that makes sense. So, like, if you've got £1 million house and you're 75% mortgage and it goes up by 3%, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
if you've got a 60 grand mortgage, it's not as impactful. So I think they will feel it less anyway. And typically, because a lot of families will probably not have a huge mortgage because the cheaper prices and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's the best time to buy because.
Is it falling more? Is it going to fall more?
I think so. I think it went up so drastically. It's probably going to be considered a correction. I think it's going to be quite a big crash. I think there's going to be. I don't see how there can't be big ramifications for COVID, increase in taxes, utility prices, cost of living, and interest rates. Like
how much are we talking by falling in terms of percentage?
I don't know. I'm nowhere near an economist. I'm not a numbers man. Yeah. I follow the 18-year property cycle, if you've ever seen that.
There's a cycle of property, which I learned in that course as well.
Yeah.
But I thought it was 10, but probably...
It's 18 years. 18. Yeah, 18 years. And since, I think, World War I, that's been the case with this boom and bust cycle. It's never going to be to the year. You're not going to, pick it. Like I say, I sold nearly 2 years ago now. That's when I thought the crash was going to be. So I'm 2 years late. But still glad I did, because if you've got money and you've got access to capital in a crash, you will buy enough property in that 2 year period that you'll never have to look at buying a house ever again.
Wow. And okay, so let's put a scenario here. So let's say I have £100,000, and do you think I would rather go in the UK, London, and buy one property with a deposit, or I'd rather spend that up north and buy 4?
I don't think it has to be as polarizing as that. Okay. There can be a middleman. The problem with going super cheap depends on what your plan is. If you're doing social housing, it doesn't matter so much because you've got that looked after. But typically, if you go cheap, you're going to have problems. You're going to struggle to find good tenants. The other problem is you buy cheap, the values aren't going to go up. They might if you're lucky, but there's still places in the north that haven't recovered from the last recession. Yeah, 15, almost 20 years later, and some just never change. So it depends on what your strategy is and what your plan is. So if you're investing for cash flow and you need monthly money, then go north if you can and just lock in your mortgage rates and get your cash flow in. But equally, I don't think property is the best for cash flow typically. I think there are better ways now, especially to earn cash flow, but.
Why would you say that? Because property, I would say, is fixed cash flow. For a fact it's coming. Whereas let's say a business, yes, sometimes people say a business is better and you make more cash, but it can be inconsistent. Whereas property, is a fixed asset and it's gonna keep providing you money.
And I suppose I say that because it's relatively low in terms of the return on your money. But yeah, you're right, and especially again going back to social housing, the reason we like it is whatever profit we secure is secured for the next decade, and that will hit our bank no matter what. Interest rates might go up, but equally we could just lock that in for 10 years too. So you can predict that side of it. If you go in London and surrounds, you're going to get a huge capital uplift, but your cash flow is going to be pretty small, and you're going to lock all your money into one property. So I like the sort of hybrid in the middle of those two
Which
things.
area do you like the most?
Well, you've got places like Birmingham, Liverpool, even Wales at the moment. Their prices are flying. You can still buy relatively cheaply. You're going to get nice cash flow, but you're also going to have the ability to have 4 properties go up in value, rather than the one in London that goes up nuts. But it still probably won't outperform 4 houses, assuming they all go well.
And you can refinance 4 and get another 4.
Every couple of years or whatever you want to do. The other thing I like about having 4 houses over just one is that if one of them goes tits up, you've got 3.
Yeah.
It's actually, again, people are like, it's risky putting all your money in leveraging and this sort of stuff. I actually think if you look at the actual nuts and bolts of doing that, it is more secure, not less.
That makes sense. And what do you think the idea? So before I ask that question, if the interest rates are higher and you're buying a property right now, then wouldn't you have the risk? Let's say you go at 2 years fixed interest rate at 6%. Don't you think you're paying shitload for two years before the interest rates calm down and then you can get a better interest rate mortgage?
Doesn't matter. Work the deal out on where you are today. You can't. No one knows what's going to happen in the future. So you can only act with the information you have to hand. So like in crashes, typically you're going to get discounts based on actual today's valuations. So the people always talk about the aim you want to get is a 25% discount. If you get a 25% discount, you've basically negotiated your deposit, which is awesome. And that also gives you a little bit of leeway in terms of the monthlies. But the thing I like about the idea of a crash, at least, is that with what I've learned over the last 10 years, I can legitimately help the people that are in trouble in their house. So if someone's in negative equity, i.e. they've got a higher mortgage than the value of their home, if then those interest rates rise, they have no choice but to sell. They would owe the bank, let's say it's valued at 100 grand, but they got 110 grand mortgage because they bought it at 120. They would have to give the bank 10 grand, but they haven't got the money. That's the whole reason they're having to give it back, and then they'll go bankrupt. Massive problems for a long time.
And that's going to happen a lot.
It's going to happen loads. Whereas someone like me could go and give them £1 and they move out and off they go. So rather than 10 grand, I give them £1 and they don't get, they're able to continue borrowing money and they can continue living their lives, and we remove the stress from them. Obviously, I won't go into massive detail on the structure of that, but it could be with lease options. It could be a multitude of things. There's something called vendor financing, probably not for the guys that are going to be, the family guys, but a lot of portfolio landlords are going to want to shift stuff for retirement. Vendor finance is an amazing way of doing that. Essentially, the person who owns that property leaves 25% in as a deposit. Okay. You go and raise 75% as a mortgage, and you give them an interest rate on that money too. So they get 75% of their money there. They're leaving 25% in, but a lot of it, they bought it for God knows hardly any money anyway. Yeah. The money's just made up in the middle of in thin air. They've done nothing for it. So them to leave thin air 25% in and earn interest on it, it's a no-brainer for a lot of people but then go, all right, cheers for that big lump. I can go and do what I want to do, and I've got it off my chest, allowing us to do how many of them can you do? Loads. But all these things, I'm obviously simplifying it all.
I mean, there's a lot, when you just said vendor finance, it was all going top of my head. But I guess when you go look more in detail, and plus you have over 10 years of experience, so you can make the most out of a crash as well. That's why you probably believe it's the best time as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great time for us to get all this information as well.
Absolutely.
I think if I'm going for it, I was thinking about buying my first home, but then I'm like, rather than doing that, I might as well invest in something right now, and then eventually I can buy my first time home.
Feels like this podcast has been more for you than anyone
I
else,
always
doesn't it?
I always said this is the whole reason for doing this podcast is if I get to learn something from you, I'm sure there's many people like me who's also first time and kind of wanting to get into property and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they will kind of get the answers at the same time. So it's kind of a mentoring session for me,
Yeah,
but
nice.
at the same time for them as well. So that's kind of the whole reason.
All good. And we weren't meant to talk about property the whole time, but we did. But it's all good.
Yeah,
You know.
but it's all useful stuff. Like, for example, I did not know all this stuff, even for social housing. And I think when you make videos around it, some videos are people know what it is and everything, but they don't really know how it works and everything. So I think this video will kind of open their eyes and make them understand that, okay, this is what goes behind the scenes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So talking about mortgages, just a while ago, me and my friend always argue about, should you repay your mortgage fully? What do you think? Should you keep your mortgage and just pay the interest? Pay the mortgage every single month and, I don't know, probably pay like 100,000 extra in interest, or should you just go ahead and pay all off?
Again, it depends. It depends what your outcome is. So I watched a video. I actually reacted to a video the other day, and I've always thought mortgage interest are usually the lowest you can possibly get. It's the cheapest money, before now at least. Even now, 5%. If you can make 10% using that money in a business, then why would you not?
That's true.
It makes no sense. Most typically, you're going to make 20% from your money if you've got a half decent business with decent margin. So to borrow at 5% and then put all that money into a business that then does 20, it's
a no-brainer.
Look at the facts of that. Take all of your emotion about paying off your mortgage and telling your mates how happy you are. Because again, a lot of this stuff's ego-driven, and what you're told as a kid, I want to pay down my mortgage and be just happy having nothing. But like it's so. What happens if you fall on hard times?
Yeah.
What happens if you can't what if you need money and you're 70 years old? You ain't getting a mortgage because you're too old. So then what? You have to sell the house anyway.
That's true.
And then downsize somewhere that you're not happy with. I think it shackles you a lot. Whereas I would rather borrow the 75% and keep it in a fucking bank account. So it's there for me to use if I need it. Ideally, like I say, I mean, even like the worst, safest investments are going to beat 2-3%.
Yeah.
So why don't you just stick it in that and just sit there and have it accessible? That's the biggest thing, that mortgages are such inaccessible money. But anyway, the thing that I watched, he basically said if rates go up to say 6, 8, 10%, then for the Joe bog standard person who isn't business minded, it actually makes sense to pay it down.
Yeah.
Essentially, your money is doing 10%, but every time you pay it down with that mindset. So actually your money's working quite hard. Problem is, if then the rates drop down to 4% again, trying to get the money back out, you'd have to refinance and blah, blah, blah. There's all the accessibility issues. I like liquid money. I like to be able to use it and pivot and move and do what we want to do with it, which is why when you buy a property, so the one again that we're buying now, we'll be buying cash. We'll get the works done and then we'll refinance it out and be sat there with the lump. And then we're ready to go every month, buy a new house every month. And just have the ability for that fluid money, because we got the deal. It was up for 120. We got it agreed at 111, which again, getting a discount has been unheard of for the last 10 years. And that's because we can buy cash, meaning we can complete in 30 days. Done. That is huge benefit to anyone selling a property. So again, in this market, we're not even close to the crash, by the way.
Is there still time?
There's loads of time.
Wow.
Crashes typically are 2 years long.
Okay.
This one.
So I think we're more looking into end of 2023 or mid 2023.
Well, I think we'll feel the effects of the crash early 2023 a bit more. Again, you look at it, a lot of the utility increases people haven't felt yet.
I have felt it because the way every month when I used to get a bill, it was just let's say £50 for electricity. Now it's almost 80.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking here, I'm like, holy crap, this is going up a lot. So imagine people who are paying £300. That's probably £450 or £500 almost.
Yeah.
So,
and it's the little things that you don't even notice a lot, because like I say, your utilities you can lock in for 2 years. So a lot of these people have locked it in. So they're going along being like, I don't know what everyone's on about. Yeah. And then they're going to come in, it's going to go triple. And they're going to, what do I do? I can't work any more hours in my job. And then their mortgage is up for renewal.
I think
was.
one third of the mortgages are for renewal.
Yeah.
coming.
And then you've got the food costs. Have you noticed? Go and get a full English breakfast. It's about 15 quid now. And you're just like, hold on a minute. When did that happen? It seems to have just all of a sudden, just these things have just cropped up, and you're just typical monthly costs are flying. So like that is unsustainable. And the first thing that people are unable to do is pay their mortgage.
Yeah, that's true as well. Now, this is a situation. I mean, this is again a thing me and my friend were discussing, or he kind of told me. It's more about kind of when the market was at its peak. People really struggled to get into the property ladder or even get their first time house. That was, one of the reasons was because I think over 90,000 properties, including homes and offices in the UK, are owned by offshore entities. Mm-hmm. So it's good for the government because the economy keeps growing and keeps getting better. But do you think it's bad for people like, let's say, people like me who now has to try and earn over £100,000 in a year in order for me to get a house in London, because 550 is like the average price in Wembley or so?
My opinion on that is, what does it matter?
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
You ain't going to change it, nor am I.
And the government doesn't care.
It's the facts of life, and you just have to wear it and do what you can to do with it, and understand that some things in life we can't change unless you're really super passionate about it and you want to devote your life to it. If you can't, crack on and do what you're told, almost. Like that. I think a lot of people obsess, and you'll hear people talking about it all the time, and they'll blame certain people, landlords, worst people in the world. Why are their rent so high? Because their mortgage is so high, and all the other costs that are involved. That's why I love renting my house. If something goes wrong in my house, I just call the landlord. Go fix this, please. Yeah. Done. Do you know how painful it is when you own a house? The amount of stuff that goes wrong. You think you're going to be sweet, and then like the guttering, and then you have to get someone round, which is almost impossible to get them round within 6 months. And even then, it's like £1,000 to put some plastic guttering on your house. That's reality of home ownership.
Owning a home.
Like again, talking about predictability, which is weird. Again, my hyperactive, constant strive for new and exciting things. I've found quite a lot of fun trying to find predictable stuff. My rent, my outgoings, monthly outgoings, remain the same, regardless of whether the gutters break or it needs painting or a new driveway. That stuff that needs doing now. Done.
I think after the social housing, you have become very predictable of like, okay, if this is coming out, only this much is going to come out every single month. And that is also a relief in a sense that, I have more cash flow coming in than my outgoing. So business is going good for 10 years. And I think that's one great thing about social housing. But at the same time, you said in property, the returns are a bit lower compared to, I would say, stocks or crypto. Have you ever looked into that?
It's not lower than stocks for sure. People always argue this.
I would say not lower than the S&P 500. But in terms of if you go for individual stocks, sometimes they can outperform in the long run.
But then they don't pay you on a monthly. That's
unless it gives dividends.
But that's not again predictable.
Yeah, that's true.
The other thing I don't like about stocks is you have no control. With property, I can go into a house and know that I can force the value up. There's nothing I can do about Apple stock or the decisions that they make or whether it goes up or down. I can look at a property and go, if I stick an extension on or a loft conversion and I spend X amount of money, it's going to be worth this much based on the fact the house down the road sold for this much and it did all those works. There's an ability to choose what happens. With stocks, you are just at the mercy of economics, news. That's the thing I don't like about it. Fuck it. Like, imagine the last 2 years of just constant bad news, all affecting your portfolio that you've put your hard-earned money into. With property, you have an ability to control, which can be good and bad sometimes. Obviously, I got
during
the
bad times. During
bad
times it's bad.
But again, lock your rates in, lock certain things in, and you can ride out any storm, and property will always bounce back. That's the thing I like about it. It's never, I did a lot of crypto right at the peak, like most people did, and got really into it.
I remember, I think you making videos and you put it 10 grand or something.
Yeah, that's lost 2.
Oh, that's 2 now.
Yeah.
So 10 grand to 2.
Yeah. But again, I'm glad I went down that rabbit hole because I think, we're considering a lot of our investors, right? Going off topic a little bit, but we take investment money, so they transfer us the cash. We give them a 20% return. We pay them monthly. That we have had multiple investors now stopped by their bank. They have said, we are not transferring the money to that company. And they've shown them evidence. They've shown them like what we do, who we are, websites, this, that, and the other, and said, this is not a scam. One of the guys is one of our partners, his dad. So he's already invested in us. He works with us, and his dad wants to invest and make money. 2 weeks, they went, nah, not sending it. Refused point blank for him to access and send his own money, regardless of what he provided. They just said, no, we're not doing it. So we're looking at potentially accepting crypto as a way in which we can receive payments. Number one, it's going to be cheaper than sending it at the bank, a lot less effort, hopefully, once we sort of educate people on how to, move money between. And for us, it shouldn't affect us too much. We're not going to use it as an investment. We're just going to turn that straight into fiat money again the minute it comes over. But equally, I think there's a real potential for a social housing coin. I don't know how that's going to work, but hopefully bring other people from the industry in, and those that invest in it will either be buying into projects that we do or whatever it may be, something like that. And I love the idea of that, the infrastructure of it. Equally, I think property sales should be done using NFTs or blockchain.
I think that's what we're heading more towards. Like I just saw in the morning, Instagram's releasing collectibles for creators to sell through the fans. So I think NFTs, blockchain, and everything will definitely take over the world in the coming few years, I would say.
Problem with the UK is everything's slow. So I know Americans are already selling houses via blockchain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. Think about it, especially with a new build, right? And this is what they were saying, that you could potentially have a 1 or 2% in if you have your property you own now freehold, and you wanted to NFT that house, you'd be the first one to do it. You could put in there that for every sale of that property, for royalties, history, you'll get a 1% cut for anyone who does that to any new property. But the best bit about it is every planning permission, every flood that happens in the area, every bit of work that's done, insurance claim, anything that happens within that property then goes into the blockchain. Yeah. And it doesn't take solicitors a million years to find out the information. They click a button and it's there.
The record is straight there.
Done. Anything we should be aware of, it's all there. Documented from top to bottom, the cost of it, what happened, what remortgage, all the information anyone could ever want is there, going to be in seconds. Therefore, why can't a transaction happen in 24 hours?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest change from almost 2 months or 1, 2, 3 months of a transaction to just shortening it down to a week.
3 months is like minimum.
Minimum.
Yeah, it's
and
ridiculous.
Also, one thing you said about taking in payments through crypto, I think that because now you can also get a credit on how much crypto you hold on your wallet.
Yeah.
So that's in one way as well. You can keep the crypto because that can go up in value while you take like
it could go down.
It could go down. It could go down as well. It could go down as well, definitely. Yeah. But so in your opinion, you would say property would be your best investment, because I think that also depends on many factors. And I think because you have done it, for you, it's that safer route as well.
Yeah. And typically, historically, it's always been a safe investment. Sometimes it's not that like exciting. But even these crypto guys, I think they kind of got the reality check that it's like, okay, it's great when it's going up, but then again, you've got no control over what happens with it, and everything's gone quiet on crypto pretty much. And yeah, I'd argue with anyone go into a project, a property project, and having the plans in which you have in place. I'd argue with anyone who says that's not an exciting thing to do. Going to a hotel like we went to, I had the best fun ever. Walking around this hotel, like 32 rooms, trying to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. The ground floor is like a bar, a restaurant. So what we're thinking is like, I was thinking you could give a local business the ability to run a restaurant out the bottom, and then we'll just take the uppers, and like your mind just starts to race. And then you're thinking like, can't wait till this is done.
It's fun as well.
Yeah, it can be, as long as it goes well. But again, the good thing about property is as long as you learn from the mistakes, you don't need to make them twice. I've made every one now, I reckon, hopefully.
So since you started, I'm sure one of your biggest mistakes or worst deals were your second one. If you could give like a range of your best deal it has performed you and the worst one. Yeah. Of like a range of amount.
Well, again, that worst one was like 100k plus. Some of our rent to rent deals will do 1,500 quid a month. Just one house.
1,500 one house.
Yeah, that we don't own, that we probably put 10 grand into.
So do you, when you get a rent to rent, do you do social housing in the HMO structure? So you get room by room?
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, we can do families as well, but typically the returns are better with HMOs, and we help more people per house as well, which is important when you've got 1 million.
I think for the people who don't know HMO, if you could just give a
brief.
So
it's multiple occupancy. Imagine a student house. It's just a house split into rooms, basically.
Yeah.
And then you charge per room. Typically, the bills are all included. I think most people should know what one is now.
Yeah.
Because it's again with the way that rents are, most people have to consider living in them.
Yeah.
And by the way, some of the professional HMOs out there now, like I'd move into tomorrow, not a problem. They're incredible, and people have really upped their game.
I've seen few, like some of them have designs of Versace, this and that. They would kind of get that USP perfectly in there as well.
And again, predictability of living in an HMO is that you pay your however much money a month, and your bills are included. It doesn't matter what happens. You know that is your costs. So there's a lot of benefit to that. But yeah, it's probably is exciting once you get out of the intricacies and the boring bits, like actually buying it and financing and like try and get a mortgage. The amount of information they need is mental. Like your waist size. Like that's what it feels like. So the amount of documents you have to go finding, and apparently we want to be paperless, but you need a printout of your last 3 months bank statements, and they won't accept it like sent directly. It's baffling, and that's why I think the blockchain thing will work in other countries, and the UK will be the last one to adopt it because
they're always the last one to adopt things.
Like the land registry takes like 6 months to register when someone's bought a house.
I think our one took around that time as well.
It's nuts. Like that is literally just tapping a few things and then putting it into a database. We've only just accepted when you buy a house that they will accept a digital signature. Just now. Before that, you had to have a wet signature with paperwork delivered to a fucking solicitor who then sent it to another solicitor before it would go through. Like it's mental to me. It's nuts.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, from this whole property conversation, I'm going to tap into the more of conversation which you had in the start, which was you didn't feel fulfilled. And I think one thing you as an entrepreneur come across later in your stage, once you made the money, is like, am I happy doing what I'm doing? Mm-hmm. So how did you kind of go through that phase and overcome that phase? Was it by talking with people?
Yeah, like I said, I hung around with Simon for a bit, Simon Squibb, and we went for a long walk actually, and he did this really weird thing. I found it really awkward. He basically said, I think it was 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and he said, basically, I'm not going to talk. So I'm going to put a timer on for 10 minutes, and you are just going to tell me about, what you're good at, what you're bad at, what's, how it all started, what you're planning to do. And I'm not going to, and it was really weird to not get anything back and respond and just having to go, he's like, yeah, you got another 5 minutes to go. It's like, and it was really weird, but like, it's quite clever. And then he went and did the same in return. And you learn a lot more
about a person.
Otherwise you're interjecting and you're stopping people in flow and you're, and yeah, it kind of, we were just trying to figure out, he could see that I was passionate and I wanted to do something and that I'm very driven, not with money, but I just feel like I've got a lot to offer the world. And at that stage, it was just not targeted anywhere. I didn't know where to put my energy. I'm super confident, always have been. I know I'm great at a lot of things, but I sometimes struggle to understand specifically what it is that I'm good at. And I find it quite hard to pinpoint. Like a lot of people have their thing. They're just like, I'm good at it.
It's hard to figure out what you're good at.
Yeah. Sometimes it's an amalgamation of loads that you're like half good at a lot of stuff, which make like you quite good at. I don't know. It's hard to kind of explain. And that was what Simon sort of helped me a lot with. But ultimately it's like, it was just looking at the business and seeing what is it that we do. And it was literally like, people say like that light bulb. It was almost like that happened. And it was just like bang on my laptop in a coffee shop in Covent Garden, just about to go in for a meeting. And I literally straight on Asana, and I was like, bang, these are the names. This is what we're going to change. And just listed out all these things. How can we help this million people? The minute we set that goal of million. So I think like Simon helped me with that as well with his, 100,000 entrepreneurs.
The purposeful project.
Yeah. So he's got that 100, he's got that number. Is it 10 million?
10 million
Yeah, yeah.
people he wants to help and grow a business.
I think having a number allows you to step back and how do we, and that was the other thing. Cause so we were talking about the, he's got the entrepreneur's house and stuff like that. And I was going to try and bring my property experience. And I was like, well, maybe we could do an HMO. He was like, I don't want to know about these little bits. Like, we've got 10 million people. And I found it so hard because normally in property you go, all the intricate little bits go together. Whereas now you've got the million people to help. Then who can we bring in to help us? Who's already doing similar stuff? Who can help us like jump, take a step? What are the stuff what stops us getting to 1 million tomorrow? It's finding the right properties. Yeah, it's finding the right properties. What's the right property look like? What areas? What funding? Funding's a massive one, of course. Property's expensive. We have to be able to fund it. So let's go and start having conversations with property funders and say, this is our goal. Are you willing to help us? That's going to be great for them as well. And all of a sudden you build this team of people who buy in to your big goal of that 1 million vulnerable people, and they want to be a part of it. A lot of our investors are like, can you tell me how many we've helped so far? Like, we've helped, like they put the money in and they're getting a return, but it's more than that. It's the fact that they've seen the problems. I mean, you only have to Google asylum seekers in the UK to see some of the horrendous stuff. I mean, even a taxi driver that took me home from a night out, I was speaking to him. Turned out he was an asylum seeker. Started talking to him about it. One of his best mates came over, 18 years old. He got put in a property somewhere, but he'd left all of his family behind. I think ended up like becoming depressed for everything he'd seen, like people dying on the journey and all this other stuff at 18. Took his own life.
Wow.
At 18 years old, after having been through all that stuff, because of all the bits he'd seen. And then when he got here, he couldn't like rationalize it and had no support or anything like that. And then that to me was just like, this is a real life example. This isn't just like, and it's just nuts that we go around living our lives without any idea on what these guys have been through.
What other people are going through as well.
What little interjection could have helped that 18-year-old not do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't have taken a lot. A little bit of understanding, a little bit of like, maybe an opportunity for a job or, something to give them purpose and them an ability to kind of rationalize what's happened and maybe focus on the future. I don't know.
I think a purpose does give you the feeling of fulfillment, because without it, you kind of feel like it's empty.
The problem is with purpose is I do think you can find it if you think about it. That's, I haven't been an asylum seeker. It's not like something that's close to my heart, or, a lot of people find their purpose in something that's happened to them in their past and they want to fix it or help stop that happening. That wasn't the case for me, but I'm just like massively empathetic for, I'm so lucky. Like, I've got both parents still about, relatively decent upbringing, dad earned decent money and lived in a decent house. And, I wasn't private schooled or anything like that, but like it's been good. Nothing's been like terribly horrible, but I've always just had this massive empathy for people that haven't had that, or people that have been through these extremely bad situations. And like, I just feel like somehow that's kind of my thing. That's what I need to do. And weirdly, using property, which everyone hates, landlords and stuff, to fix a problem like that, because property to an investor typically is just bricks,
and money,
bricks and numbers. Yeah, that's it. But you go and put someone in there who's never had security or warmth or comfort and feeling safe and having their own space and, the ability to be creative and, I don't know, just live and know that they're going back to somewhere that's safe again. Like, it's mental how we think about these things such a little amount of our time. We go back to our house and we go and sleep in our nice comfy bed, and we still get pissed off and stressed about stuff.
I mean, we're always like me and my friend are always complaining about work, and then some days we look at some people just going on a tube, like going to a 9 to 5, and I'm like, damn, how lucky am I to wake up here whenever I want and come in here and do whatever the hell I want here.
It's a mad human thing that we all have, I think,
Yeah.
where like no matter what problem, no matter what, and again that goes back to like the money not being a thing.
Yeah.
You'll be stressed about stuff regardless of where you are. Sometimes having money is worse because
You
typically
stress more about the problems which money brings is what you stress more about. And
Yeah.
then you think that I wish I had less money and less problems.
people are
obviously.
reliant on you, and like
Yeah.
I look back at working in the pub, living in our flat. Well, it was a mix between living at my mum's and then we moved out into our first flat, and just having our little 1-bed flat. Me and my wife are literally like, we look like, obviously the house we're in now is like ridiculously different to that, but we still now maintain I'd go live in that flat tomorrow.
Yeah.
We absolutely loved it. It was everything we could have wanted. It was everything we needed. And I went to work at the pub. I did 2 double shifts, and then just like a normal Sunday shift or something. And then the rest of the time I was off. I earned enough money to fund going out and enjoying ourselves and doing the odd holiday. And it was like, that is just simplicity of and enjoyment of life. Changes when you have kids. Let me tell you that.
Have a
and again,
house.
young people who are saying, I don't want to take risks because of this, that, and the other. Life becomes a lot more difficult when you've got kids.
So take it before you have kids.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. If you don't have the choice, still do it for sure. But yeah, it's
And it's also lifestyle inflation. Like you kept your lifestyle inflation really low in the start as well.
mhm.
Whereas most people, as soon as they see some money, they start getting the new cars, getting a house, better house, paying more in rent and all sorts of stuff.
Still now, I'm like, everyone laughs at this because they think I spend loads of money because of the rent on the house and stuff. But I don't spend that money. That money's done by the money that we already had in the house. Like, I don't consider the rent that we pay on that house
How
as
much? Like,
opulence.
what's the range of the rent in that place? Because that house is massive.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the new one because we moved.
Oh, I haven't seen the new one. So you left the old one, which was massive as
after
well.
a year.
Is
we
it bigger
moved.
than that or as same size?
Yeah, similar size.
Similar
yeah,
size.
yeah.
So what's the range for
It's
that?
like $3,500. a month.
Okay, makes sense.
Um,
And how many bedrooms is it?
5.
5.
Yeah.
You're looking at probably around the same thing in here as well.
Yeah, exactly. We're in Berkshire technically.
Okay.
So it's a relatively expensive area, but I also think like you could go and get a bog standard 3-bed semi-detached will cost you 2.5.
Yeah.
So the extra grand, that's again, I'm not like poo-pooing a grand, but like that's being paid for by the money that we invested. So it's done. We set out to be the money we had in the house. We wanted to reinvest and make 5K a month. That was done within year 1.
Wow.
Sorted, done. And because of the contracts we have, that's 10 years worth of knowing that that's the case. Doesn't matter what happens now, that's getting dealt with. So the rent's getting paid every month, no matter what. So are the bills. But yeah, it's.
I mean, the one thing you say, so you wanted to make 5K, but there's a video you made, which is a really nice video, was like your life in the UK changes when you start making £10,000 per month. How does one 18-year-old can do something, let's say even in the partnership program, and how long will it take him, or how many deals will it take him a month to make that amount?
Yeah, so we actually set that out. So that video came on and I was like, hold on. I think the guy said in America it was like 20 grand.
20
I was like,
grand,
that's
yeah.
a bit punchy. Like $5 grand will give you a decent life, but I also don't think people seem to think when that level of money you'll be able to relax. I don't think you can at that money. I think 10 grand gives you the ability to put money away, reinvest, feel a level of comfort, and a level in which you can have a bit of opulence. And like people feel like they can't go on holidays. Like I find it quite weird. So me and my wife both work for ourselves. She's always worked in offices and stuff like that, and you almost have that 30-day holiday mindset still.
Yeah.
So it's like, but we went on holiday last month. We can't like we randomly went and moved to Tenerife for a month a couple of years ago. Literally, I think
I saw that. I think
it was the Sunday. Boris was about to announce another lockdown. By the Tuesday, we were there for a month, and she was just like, "We can't." The anxiety set, and I was like, "We can do what we want. We're completely free." But anyway, what was your question?
Oh no,
It was about the 10 grand.
Yes.
How do they do it? Yeah, so we from that video, obviously it went mental on TikTok for me anyway, not for you. But it was like we ended up with 1,000 people filling out a form with their details in to be a part of the program. And we basically set a roadmap from 0 starting to 10 grand a month within 12 months.
Within 12
Now that's
months.
intense. And it's like it's only going to be certain people that be, number one, have full-time hours, and number two, have the right sort of skills and tenacity and ability to just absolutely go for it. Because to get that amount of money monthly in 12 months needs 3 rent-to-rent deals at an average of 500 quid a month profit within them. And then bringing in 75k of investment. So within 12 months, 6 grand of that will be passive for the next 10 years.
Okay.
And the rest will be chunks of money from the investor funds. So like, it's going to be graft, but it's fucking lot of money.
Yeah.
It's going to be 10 years, like, to get to a point in which I can even see how that's possible. And bearing in mind, the program is paid. We put a charge on it purely to weed out the idiots, and it's perfectly worked, by the way. The people that have come in are just amazing.
I think when you do something for free, people don't realize the value of it.
I didn't want to charge that. I wanted to give everyone the opportunity.
Because in the start it was free, but then I understand how you probably had like so many people come in, just listen to it, blah blah blah, and then just leave.
Well, the problem is because it's a partnership and it's not a course. They are going around talking about our business. So if we just get these dickheads from TikTok walking around into agents going, I'm working with Jack Wicks at Social Housing Group, and then they say no and they call them whatever, then very quickly there's going to be problems and our business is going to be like devalued. The reputation and everything. Yeah. So the only way we could think of doing it was, well, and we only charge 100 quid a month. Cancel whenever you like. Doesn't bother us whatsoever. And totally up to you in terms of how much you do, how much you work, how many deals you do. We're not going to be pressing you to do stuff. Totally on you. We do weekly calls to sort of like get everyone go in. We'll do Christmas parties, and like I'm again going back to the community thing. I appreciate how much it helps having people all doing the same thing, helping each other, pushing each other. I don't really want to be that involved. We've got like a Slack group where everyone talks in there, and we've sort of got senior partners who've been there for a while, and they're the ones answering a lot of the questions and getting involved and almost leading the way. So yeah, it's super cool. But yeah, typically I would say to get to 10 grand a month in our program within 24 months isn't that hard. The other thing, I mean, starting something from scratch, it took me 3 months to get my first rent-to-rent deal when I started it 7-8 years ago. So assuming that's the case, but I got a deal a month consistently then, and I didn't have the ability to use us as leverage with, we've got proof of funds, we've got the website that shows our mission and who we're helping and track records, and me and my business partner can pass referencing.
It's like a cheat code.
All of this stuff is there for them. All they do is, can you let me this house because the deal works? Okay, that's agreed. Jack, take over. Okay. I'll get 200 quid a month for the next 10 years.
That makes sense, and I think it's a win-win situation for both. Yep. I mean, that was a great knowledgeable conversation about property and all of that stuff. I'll be now moving to kind of, I call it the 7 Inspired Mind questions, because they are just deep questions.
Oh dear.
So the first one being is, what motivates you to work hard every day when you wake up?
Yeah, I was going to go into a big rabbit hole working hard and the fact it's working smart and all that stuff. Yeah, it's I think hard work's a weird thing, firstly, because people would not consider what I do as hard work. Someone digging up a road in the pouring rain would be like, oh, he works really hard. I think it's very subjective, and until you swap places with that person, would you realise? And it's a different level of, that's physical work.
For us, mental.
Yeah, so like I used to coach kids football. Okay. Mate, that mentally... 5 hours of that and you need to sleep for a week. It is mentally like such hard work, but people would see you running around playing football with kids. Like it's yeah. But anyway, staying motivated to continue to push myself and make more money and change more things in the world is obviously the classic. Is my 2 children. I've got a 4-month-old and nearly a 4-year-old now, and obviously, the fact that the close family, my wife and my 2 kids, are the obvious ones, setting a good example for the kids and all that sort of stuff. And I think now
you have 1 million people, vulnerable people to house. So that's probably another one as well.
Technically a pressure and a constant push. Yeah, exactly. That I do feel that, because I have those down days. Weirdly, a lot more recently. I had one of these almost a week last week.
It's like a burnout.
Not burnout. No, just a loss of confidence and like, what am I doing? Like, why haven't I done this? And I've got undiagnosed ADHD, and that basically brings me times of like being paralyzed by work, and I will sit there and I'll have tons of stuff to do. and I know how important they are, whether it be doing a video and the editor needs his time to do it or whatever. And I'll sit there and I can't physically do it. And I'll have this block on, I don't know what to talk about because I don't want to talk about property anymore. And I just cannot get myself to do these things. And last week was almost a write-off entirely. And weirdly, Monday morning, bang.
Back to
but full pelt, like smashed out one of my favorite videos that I've ever done, went to the gym, eating well, like, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. It's really weird.
I think it's normal to feel that because I could talk about me. There are many times I just can't be asked as well.
Yeah.
And for you, I think, because you're trying to make a video every day, do you ever batch kind of script or one day just for creativity? So you just sit there and just write down the ideas of what you're going to talk about, anything like that?
Yeah, so when I'm listening to stuff and I'm seeing other videos, I'll typically like write bits down. I've got a full list. But again, I always think it's hard to be passionate about a subject if you're not feeling like that anymore.
Yeah.
I always try, if I get a sense of like anger or annoyance, or I'll try and get on the camera then when it's raw and it's actually going to bring emotion. I think that makes such a big difference rather than not being bothered about it anymore.
That is very
But anyway,
true.
back to the question. It's like that does make you feel guilt. And then you're like, I've got people to help here. We've got a load of people in the Philippines that work with us. They need paying if I'm not doing stuff and I'm not on it. But then again, that can make it worse.
Yeah.
But a really big one for me is actually my parents, weirdly. And it's a bit of a morbid one because like I know they're going to die and I'm going to be around when my parents are not around anymore. So like that is a constant for me to be like, make them proud. And it's one of them. Your parents are always going to be anyway, but it's one of those constant things that I just want to like make sure that I've done everything I can to make sure they're looked after. And then when they're not as able or whatever, then they'll continue to be looked after. That's a big thing for me. But equally working hard, like I'd prefer to have time off with them than work my bollocks off to get money to then support them. I'd much rather spend good time with them now when we can do holidays and we can do, just general walks around and like just quality time with them. People's version of that is sitting in an office for 24 hours a day to earn all the money to make them proud, but never spend any time with their parents.
That's really true.
But anyway, that wasn't a short answer, was it?
No, I mean that does make sense as well. So moving on to the second question is, what is your definition of success?
Yeah, I bet. Does anyone give you like one line of responses to these things?
The only one person who did was Simon Squibb. He was just in one line, everything in one line.
Yeah, he's a veteran though. I think success is in the eye of the beholder. Is my answer to that. Nobody can tell you whether you're successful or not, which is why I find it weird. Is like, well, you're successful. Well, how do you know? What was my goal?
Yeah.
Because and I think naturally successful people never reach an end because it's just one goal after another, and you never sit there and you never stay still. So you could consider someone who continually hits goals as a success, but I think it's all internal anyway.
I think that's a really, really good answer, and it really also matches with how money is not the only thing which defines success.
Oh, without a doubt.
Question number 3. What's your end goal? Like, why are you doing all this for? Even the 1 million people you want to house?
Just again to, I always think on my deathbed. So this is when it all changed. I had this thing where I was just like, what did he do? Oh, he bought a load of houses. Loads of them.
You don't want to be known as that guy.
Well, like there's got to be more to it than just accumulating money and stuff. Like if I can be on my deathbed and they'll be like, he changed the lives of 1 million people through his property business. He changed the lives of a load of people who were unhappy and, helped him find what they were excited about, whether that be in property in the partnership program, because we have the ability with the partnership program to make people 10 grand a month, in a year or two. Like those people could look and be like, that guy changed my life. That guy then in turn changed whoever's like I just want to help people
and leave a better legacy than just making money
and have a fucking good time while I'm doing it. I want to have fun, not be stressed about stuff, get pissed whenever I want to get pissed, and go on holiday when I want to go on holiday, and do it in a way in which I can still help people while I'm doing that
and enjoy life.
Yeah,
just that. Yeah, I mean that perfectly makes sense as well as a person you are. Next question. If money wasn't a thing, would you still be doing what you're doing? Let's say property.
Probably not in reality. I don't know in answer to that. It's almost impossible to know, isn't it? Because I think you have to have...
even my question would be like, I don't know, except the part of making videos. If money wasn't a thing, I would still make videos.
But about what? You wouldn't know what to make them about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I would just talk about motivating and mindset and stuff like that. But it's like it's a tough question.
Yeah, it
sometimes.
is, because you're typically motivated by money, or not by money, but what money gives you, which is the freedom and the ability to help others and blah blah blah. Money's demonized by a lot of people, but actually it's just a tool, isn't it? It's a tool to allow you to be free and help other people. But I just can't answer that one. It's so hard, because I think naturally, to know, you have to try things, and there's always an initial impetus to start something, and typically it's like, that makes a load of money. Let me look more into that. Oh, I actually enjoy this, and I'm actually quite good at it. There's always an outcome based thing. It's like that's FBA for you. It's like, well, I know people make money in this. Yeah. Like buying and selling is good fun anyway, but like you wouldn't have looked at it if there wasn't the monetary element in it.
And that's where they define if that's a good business. So money is a big factor after all anyway.
Yeah, and then you can learn to enjoy that stuff once you're in it. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, that's a good answer as well.
I've gone around it. Yeah.
The next question is, it's kind of related to the last one as well, but would you be rich and unhappy or poor and happy?
Poor and happy has to be the answer.
But at the same time, money is a factor. You're
changing the question now.
Because as we just spoke about the last one, how would you still be doing what you're doing? And then we said like, yes, because
I'd say poor and happy, because you have the ability to make money, and you can't quite just decide to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, so and unhappiness comes in 1,000,001 forms. Some of that is like deep rooted, some of that is based on shit that's happened. Those things can't be switched or changed. You can't just go, I'll be happy now because I've got money or whatever. So I think I'd rather do that, because I feel like I'd have the ability to make money. And I think if you're happy and you're confident, and you know, like people like being around you because of that, therefore I think money gravitates to happy and confident people.
That's really a good answer as well. I mean, you're smashing through these as well. So the next question, I normally phrase it, one thing you would like to change in the world, but I think for you, because you kind of hate the people in the property, one thing you would like to change in this property kind of aspect, the business, entire property business.
Remove them all. No, it's it would be genuinely to bring the trading of property in terms of like how we buy it. Has to change. Like, it's unfair for, not even talking about us doing it as a business. Like I think the second property me and my wife bought, or were trying to buy, we should have completed around Christmas time. Wife's gone and bought a puppy for it to be in the garden, all that stuff. And the owner, after 4 months, just went, I don't want to sell anymore. Done.
Wow.
We lost like $4,000 in fees. We lost like all that money, all that time. Puppy had to get cancelled, like all this stuff, and the emotional
roller coaster.
Yeah, it's so unfair for him just to go, nah, and there'd be no recourse. He didn't have to pay us our money back, nothing. He just decided he didn't want to sell anymore. That's a huge problem in property, because especially, you know, in London, when property prices are flying, you agree a purchase, but in 2 months it's gone up 10 grand, and then the owner goes, I'm going to sell that to someone else for another 10 grand. And you lose out because it's all moving so quickly. So it has to be made simpler, but I can't see it happening in the near future, to be honest. I don't think it's financially. I think it would hurt them, the government and everything financially, if it was made easier. Solicitors wouldn't be as needed.
It's like a domino effect. If one stops, then other people will be affected.
That's why they're so slow and calculated with stuff, because they know that it needs changing, but
they also need to find a replacement for all the other stuff.
Well, yeah, the slightest bit of change can, like, the property is a huge thing for the economy massively, and even like stamp duty changes and all that stuff. The effect that has on like taxation and all the other stuff, like, it would be a big move to say all property is now being traded by the blockchain.
Yeah.
A solicitor only needs to spend an hour to do a transaction now, not 3 months, it's gonna be mental. But that would be the one. The easy answer to all the fallouts is go. And I don't think I'd ever say this about anything else, but Scotland, the way they buy property, you have to put a 10% deposit down, and if you want to pull out, you lose that.
Oh,
yeah. So if you have an offer accepted, you pay your deposit, and you're locked in, both sides. So neither side can pull out unless they're willing to give you the 50 grand or however much it was. And if you pulled out, you'd lose it.
Okay. That's, I think, a lot
super
fair.
simple.
Yeah.
And that's why there's the modern method of auction that you probably see everywhere. So auctions, you normally have a 30-day completion period. You have to pay your 10% on the auction room when you get it accepted, and you must complete within 30 days, which shows that these things can be done in 30 days, by the way.
Yeah.
It's no different to a normal thing. But a modern method of auction is like you pay your 10% down and you have 45 days to complete. Or 60 days, it depends. The reason they've done that is because typical home buyers' mortgages can't complete in 30 days. So they just elongate that with the security of with the 10% down. The problem is the fees that are charged on them are just, I think it's like 4% to sell.
Wow. So they're just making money from that.
Yeah. So there's no good answer to it, but yeah, it should be simpler than it is.
That did give the answer. It's mainly changing into a blockchain kind of system.
Ideally.
Yeah. And moving on to the last question, which is your top 3 books about self-development.
I'm just going to cheat and look at all yours.
Yeah. I'm sure you probably read some of this.
Yeah,
like Rich Dad Poor Dad.
4-Hour Work Week. That was one of the like early books that I read. I thought was amazing. But more recently, there's a few like curveballs in here. I'm going to forget his name. Who's the little comedian who stars with The Rock?
Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart. He's got a book about motivation.
Okay.
Can't remember what it's called, but I've listened to it about 4 times, and it's the best motivational book that I've ever listened to. And every now and again, I'll just have a listen to that, and it gets you going. Second one would be again, I've always forgot this. The How Not to Give a Fuck or something like that. What's that one book?
Yes, I think
you know the one I mean.
I think I've heard of it, but I've not read it.
Yeah, trying to think of that one. That's really good. Again, another thing I've listened to a few times, and then another one. I have to have a book called Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley. Again, another book. Daniel Priestley's got like 3 books. I try not to listen to too many people who have different opinions, because I think it all confuses you. Yeah. If you find someone you like who
sticks to one,
who you agree with in a lot of what they say, then I'll just, because what I found is with Oversubscribed, every time I've listened to it, I've been in a different place with my businesses or a different launch or something else, and I've heard different things that I'd never heard the first time I listened to it.
It always happens
because I'm in a different place entirely. Yeah. So the whole thing is about, like, let's say you have an event, don't go and book Wembley Stadium and then try and sell tickets and sell 5 of them. Go and sell the tickets
first.
Get the people there, get it all hyped up, and then you get the event space that suits the ticket sales. Like that's an obvious way of thinking about it. But if you allow that mindset to set in, it can be used in so many different parts of your life and reduce your risk massively.
I think in property is the same as well.
Yeah. Reverse engineer it. That's why we've got the tenant there. So when we go and buy a property, we already know what tenant's going in it and how much they're going to pay. So we're reverse engineering the property rather than buying it and going, hopefully we can get a tenant in there who pays us this much. Tenant's done. Then what do? We buy the property. So it's in reverse.
And it is safer to do it that way as well. And that's once again another great answer. So thank you so much for those answers. And I think a lot of people have definitely learned a shitload about social housing. Myself, I've definitely learned a lot. And I think I'm definitely going to put my step into property in the start of 2023 and definitely get in touch with you.
There you go.
On that
Let's
as well.
do it.
But guys, if you don't know who Jack Wicks is, all his social media links is in the description. So go check him out. And he does post now consistently on his social medias compared to before. So you'll definitely see videos on his YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok. You can follow on all 3 platforms. Thank you, Jack, for joining once again.
Thank you so much, mate. Really appreciate it.